Tradition. When I posted on Facebook that this was going to be happening, of course, all my old musical theater friends were putting up the Fiddler on the Roof memes and GIFs and things like that, because that was just a gimme. And so I really sort of left my own introduction to this talk, introduction of me, for the end, because I really sort of struggled with what to share with you about me and about my work that would set the context and be relevant for you all. So I help people how to learn to move without pain, without drugs. I help people to learn how to be pain-free, in other words, without drugs. And I do that through a non-medical process that's called the Feldenkrais method. Non-medical, you know, if you have a sore shoulder, lots of times you'll go to the doctor, you'll get physical therapy, you might even have surgery on your shoulder. In my work, I ask, what's a shoulder for? How does this person use their shoulder? And then I help them to be able to use their shoulder for the purpose that they want to use it for in living their life. And very often the pain goes away and their experience improves, their structure improves, but their function improves. So we're about improving how things work and function. So a pianist, a violinist, a rock climber, or a major league pitcher all use their shoulders in a different way with different necessities. So they each have a different approach. Even though they all have a shoulder, it's not the same shoulder. So that's what makes it educational. I create conditions to evoke one's highest possible level of functioning that's available to them in that moment. So I'm in the improvement business. And I do classes, I do individual private lessons, I do workshops, and I go into companies and do ergonomic consulting with stressed out executives who look at their computers too much during the day. I came to this from the background in the fine arts. I was a choir and drama nerd in high school. I have degrees in music. I was a university professor for over a decade, vocal coach, and stage director for opera and musical theater. And so a lot of my career was spent in teaching aspirational, emerging artists on that path. And it sort of grew into my current work, which is really kind of the same thing, improving performance, however you define that. So before we get started, I want to see who I'm with. On your name tag, the icebreaker is, I mean, and this is, Wendy and I were talking earlier, this is the line in the sand, people. Cranberry sauce. Canned?
Yes.
Or fresh?
Yes.
And if canned, jellied or whole berry? You see, there are distinctions here. Thank you. So, in talking about tradition, there's kind of no more immediate hot button than food, right? And so I grew up in the Chicago suburbs as a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, suburban, corporate America, parents, child. And so for me, the holiday dinner was jellied canned cranberry sauce, white bread dressing, turkey, green bean casserole, and pumpkin pie. And any other items on the menu or other menu is beside the point, wrong, or not Thanksgiving. So that's where I come from. My childhood wasn't really filled with traditions. My parents were older. They were exhausted from the get-go, right upon my arrival. My mother was kind of the bearer of traditions other than the ones that happened just as the course of my life. So I remember as a child we would take the train down to downtown Chicago in the Loop, and this was before Black Friday. We would go the Friday after Thanksgiving and everything was closed. But the major department stores downtown would unveil their magical window displays for the Christmas season. And there were, animated things and lights and these beautiful, fantastical creatures. And we would just walk around in the cold, just looking at the windows. And that was our tradition. We did that year after year after year after year. When I got into high school, I had the opportunity to sing in a very fine choir. And this was back in the 70s, we went on a European concert tour. Now it's just sort of everybody does that. Back then we were one of the few and one of the first. Got a lot of my early performing opportunities there. And one of the traditions of that culture was at our Christmas concert of the year. And yes, we had Hanukkah songs too, because Debbie and Hannah Rosenthal, who were the rabbi's daughters, sang in the choir as well. But at the end, we would sing the Hallelujah Chorus every year, and all of the choir alumni who had come from hither and yon and far away were invited to come up on the stage and sing with that. And that was always a tearjerker and wonderful, and you just sort of lived for the day when you could go back, and do that. Life changed for me with marriage and children and making new traditions and divorce and bilocation on special days and navigating those things. So this time of year has, for many years, been very difficult for me because I think one of the things that brings tradition into really high relief, high focus, is a sense of what has been lost and what can we hold on to. So I thought we'd look for a moment at what is tradition. What is a tradition and what makes something traditional? So old academics never die. They just Google a lot more. I actually looked this up because I knew what I thought, but I just thought I'd survey a little bit. What do you think of this? A long-established or inherited way of thinking or acting. So it's long established. That means you've done it more than once. We had some friends who didn't have children, and they had, we were talking about our Thanksgiving plans, and they had just found a fantastic bakery where they got their pies and rolls. These are fantastic. This first time they had just moved to Houston. They purchased all this. They had their meal. This is our tradition. Well, it was a joke. It's like we're planning to do this for year to year, but like one time doesn't make it a tradition. Here's another one. What do you think of this? A continuing pattern of culture, beliefs, or practices. So it's continuing, it's ongoing, and it's a pattern, which means that there are recognizable elements that also recur, right? So it's not just something on the same day, but it's some elements of the same something at a time. Very often traditions are also handed down from generation to generation. So from my mother, I got the special Christmas ornament that I still have. It's a little metal Santa Claus on skis, teeny tiny. My children get along great, but I know after I leave this earthly realm, there will be blood over who gets the Santa on skis. My mother also would make hush puppies, and she was from Arkansas. We were living in Chicago. She was living in Arkansas. This was a total anthropological, experiment. And black-eyed peas on New Year's Day, obviously. And so I did not realize until probably 4 or 5 years ago that my mother's black-eyed pea recipe, which was handed down to her from her mother, is terrible. It's terrible. It's tasteless. The texture is disgusting. And my children would like choke down a bite so that I would get off their case. I discovered a totally new way of making black-eyed peas like 4 or 5 years ago. That is delightful. And I called my children, I said, please forgive me. I did not know any better. This is what I received. It explains why my grandmother visiting us on New Year's Day one year served up her black-eyed peas and then proceeded to use like a jar and a half of pickle relish on top. It was the only way to make them palatable. So my grandmother had not questioned the recipe either. I don't know where she got it. An element that I didn't find in the dictionary that I was thinking about is that something that makes a tradition is that the people who are observing it agree upon and share the sense of what that tradition means. You know, a tradition is kind of a big, embodied symbol of something else. There's shared meaning. And synonyms for this are ritual, convention, custom, practice, and habit. So a lot of what I do in my work has to do with having people recognize what their habits are in movement. I had an elderly client who called me and said, oh my gosh, I can hardly move. My back hurts so much. When did it start? I don't know. I was getting out of the car at my doctor's office. I was just bent over. They had to give me muscle relaxants. I don't know. I can't move. Well, I went to him and I showed him how to get in and out of his car a different way. And he said, well, that didn't hurt at all. So instead of, stepping in and going like this, when you're 85 is probably not a great idea. Probably not a great idea when you're 35 either, just by the way. And so I asked him if he'd be willing to get in the car like he was a lady in the 1950s, So he sat down and then turned his knees into the car. Didn't hurt at all. So in the absence of a better choice, your habit will persist. And a habit is just something you keep doing and doing and doing, automatically? Sometimes compulsively, if you have no other choice. Another thing I got interested in the course of working with people with movement is neuroscience. And as I think about habit, which literally makes structural grooves, pathways in your gray matter, maybe even in your white matter, You have if it's a happy occasion for your tradition, you're getting serotonin, you're getting dopamine, you're getting these feel-good neurotransmitters and hormones, right? You're getting oxytocin, which is the bonding, right? Which is a lot of what happens with our traditions and with our holidays. What can happen and go sadly wrong is that instead of, being able to leverage these feel-good chemicals that tell your whole system, let's do this again, right? If the first celebrations of traditions the first time weren't fun, didn't make people feel good at some level, they wouldn't have continued doing it, right? Our nervous systems are kind of on a search mission. I like that, I'm gonna do that again, and again, and again, and again, right? And so we have things that have lasted for millennia in terms of tradition. The flip side of that is the pressure of the traditions and living up to the expectation, the desire for everyone to have the same experience that you're having can kick you into the stress hormones of cortisol, adrenaline, norepinephrine, which also change your brain into more rigid, more habit-driven behaviors. They also stimulate weight gain and compromised immune system and put you at the door of all kinds of things that you don't really want to have happening. So I'm one of those people for whom traditions became oppressive. You know, how are we going to top next year? You know, if you've already given your 8-year-old a 4-wheeler ATV, not that there's anything wrong with that, but like, what's next? You know, how do you top that? The gifts, the decorations, you know, we need a bigger tree, we need more lights, we need more ornaments, we need more presents, we need a bigger trip, we need more clothes. And more isn't always better. More and the pressure to produce more can lead you in that downward spiral where this tradition is not working for me anymore. So I think there's a way to continue with traditions and to improve them by asking, how do traditions work? You know, again, a function. What does this shoulder need to be able to do? What does this tradition need to be able to do? So you can think about, we want it to foster more connection, a sense of comfort or peace or closeness, perhaps. In terms of our national traditions, you know, that it fosters unity or pride or a sense of cooperation. So when you want to improve the quality of your experience around this time of year or when faced with some other tradition, and it's feeling a little off to you, you're feeling more stressed, you're feeling more in performance mode, or competitive mode, or anxiety mode, to just step back and say, what function do I want to improve? I want to create, or as Robert Fritz says, instead of asking what problem do you want to solve, ask what would you like to create? So, wow, I'd like to create a stress-free environment. I'd like to create a space where my kids and my grandson and I can just hang out for a period of time without pressure or schedule. I'd like to create something that doesn't put me in debt for the next 6 months. I'd like to create something that doesn't put me in the hospital or cause me to gain 10 pounds in 10 days. You know? So when you're thinking about what it is that you're moving toward, when you're thinking about your highest level of functioning and the experience you'd like to create for yourself and others, transitions can be transitions and traditions. Traditions can transition from something that was pretty good, okay, nice, or terrible. Wherever you're starting from, it can improve and improve and improve if you bring a fresh eye to improving function. So I hope that your traditions this year are rich and that you take some time to just think about what you would like to create, what kind of experience you would like to have, and instead of just getting more stuff, to really think about what conditions would help not just you have a better holiday, but would also create conditions so that everyone in your circle can also elevate their experience. And then you'll be onto something that will change subtly through the years, through time, through growing up, through births, through deaths, really these enduring experiences that are flexible and joyful and meaningful.